All right, I'm going to get started, and this conversation is one of the more meaningful and emotional ones we'll have. I want to give a big shout out to Tracy Ritter, who's in the front row here. Tracy has been with this work from the very beginning and has been a leader supporting families, given the impact that addiction has on families. And one thing that this panel is going to capture in a way that last year in this topic we didn't do the same breadth. We went a little more depth. The nature of the impact on families from addiction has a range of different scenarios. And there's not one type of story you're going to hear, but there are a range of stories. And the differences in which people experience addiction from family members means we have to support people in different ways. Tracy has really done an incredible job providing support to families. It's been a priority of ours, continues to be. As Jamie mentioned, we've got a call for proposals that we'd like to fund using our state share, one of which is supporting families, affected families. We have 4 affected family members. Cheryl Goodman, who is here with us, a parent advocate, and has found a way, as everyone here has, to put their pain into purpose. Gail Engel is the founder of the Grand Family Coalition. This is an area we didn't really touch on last year, but how grandparents are so affected by addiction, and in her case, raising her grandson because of addiction as a way of making people unable to parent. Tanya Wheeler, who asked a question earlier and is the leader of an organization called Advocates for Recovery. And we talk a lot in this group about peer recovery. Tanya is an extraordinary leader, the first organization that has that mission, and is someone who raised kids, having to carry being in recovery and a parent at the same time, raises challenges as well. And finally, Tina, help me with your last name, pronounce her. Trina, I said Tina. Trina Fates. Trina Fates, who works with Empowered Family Recovery and Youth in Recovery, helping support those who are on this journey. I want to start with a level set, which I've previewed. And Tanya, I'll start with you. What inspires you to do this work? What is your story? What is your why?
Thank you, A.G. Weiser. The answer for me is that I really did a lot of destruction in my own family as I was using substances and struggling with my own mental health issues. So my family and the damage, and then my recovery. And me becoming a mom in recovery at 22. I had my children when I was 16 and 19. And then how to navigate, like you said, being a mom in recovery with the damage that was done, and having to keep my recovery as my priority so that I could continue to succeed. From there, I'll just say they created a lot of family instability. I have learned in my adult years about a lot of family secrets that were held in my family system. And even at 35 plus years of my own sustained recovery, I'm still working on some of that stuff. It's a work in progress. And lastly, I was lucky enough to be friends with a young man named Adam, who died in 2014 from an overdose. And I was very, very close to Adam. And he was supposed to admit into treatment on Friday morning, and he died on Wednesday night. And so I carry Adam with me every time I come in and do this stuff.
I'm just going to ask one follow-up question, Tanya, which your why brings into the room, which is behind stories of addiction, and we got to this earlier, is trauma, sometimes family trauma. And one of the challenge is to name and to be honest about a shared experience. Mr. Rogers says if it's mentionable, it's manageable. Obviously, your rebuilding project carries with you. Where do you find the strength for that work?
So it's kind of similar to what I said in the big room earlier today. It's about being a peer, but it's also about maintaining my own recovery and not just maintaining that. But I say to all of my staff all the time, if you're working with somebody and they say to you, how are you supporting your own recovery, you better have an answer. And today I can tell you that I have an answer. I have a therapist, I have a 12-step sponsor, I have a group of closed-mouth, close women in my circle, and I continue to do the work. So it's not just my work in the public, it's my work inside my heart.
Trina, you're choosing a challenging line of work. Why?
Great question. A couple of times I've almost quit.
You were here earlier, we talked about burnout, right?
Yes, and
Right.
I want to talk about that burnout and secondary trauma that parents go through, because that's what I went through. When my daughter became addicted to opioids, she was misprescribed them for Lyme disease when she was 15 years old. She became addicted to heroin and became an IV heroin user at 16 years old in a Boulder high school. That's where she was introduced to it. My dear friend in Steamboat lost her 19-year-old son to a morphine overdose, street illicit morphine. And then another friend lost a son. All this while my daughter is spiraling downhill, and I'm trying without any resources or idea what to do to navigate this journey. Someone very brilliantly brought up, and I've heard it twice today, that rehab is the smallest part of your recovery. Well, I can't tell you how many experts told me she'd better go off to rehab or she wasn't going to get better. Well, my daughter actually never made it through rehab. She walked every time. So we created a community-based support system and MAT treatment, and she made it, but it took a long time. And I watched her, or I know she overdosed 6 times, thank you Narcan and rescue breathing, and it took 6 years, and she became a cocaine and heroin IV user. But there were times when I was going to quit. I ran the Boulder County Substance Use Advisory Group for 7 years, and during that time, 3 of the young people I mentored passed away. They were sober, but they passed away when they relapsed. And I felt I wasn't good enough, and I had to take that off of myself because I watched how hard the rest were fighting to live and fighting for their recovery, and realized that when we quit, because of our pain, we're quitting them too. But it brings up a very important point about the secondary trauma and the burnout that parents and families are going through, and it's so important that we recognize that and treat that and support that. In my life, I know 6 beautiful parents who have lost their children. I'm very close with them. I know countless families that have lost their children. One of them is in this room. She's lost both her sons. And we'll talk more about that in the future. But every time I think I'm done, I come to something like this and I realize I'm far from done.
Well, thank you for staying in this work. Gail, I really appreciate you bringing the grandparent perspective, because you're seeing this across 2 generations, and for, I think, the first time put together a coalition of grandparents. Help us understand what got you here and what keeps you in this work.
Well, I am a grandparent raising my grandson. I've had him for 18 years. He has fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And when I first came into this situation, my daughter was very ill. We were going to do an intervention with her because she chose alcohol as her drug of choice. But then I started to realize I wasn't the only one, and I needed resources. I needed to understand, how do I help my daughter? How do I get the things I need to support me while I raise my grandson? Well, the co-founder of Grand Family Coalition is one of the best stories that I can tell you. Becky Seville, the co-founder of Grand Family Coalition, had 2 children in the child welfare system because her daughter was addicted to meth. So the children got taken away, and they couldn't place the children with Becky because Becky had COPD. So they placed them in foster care. Well, going through a 2-year ordeal with child welfare, along came another child, a 3rd child, and another case was open against the mother and the father of these children. Well, not even a year later, another child was born, blind, deaf, because of the exposure to the chemicals. So a 3rd child welfare case was open. I traveled with Becky every week to go to the 3 different court cases. How was she going to be supported? She had to make a choice between her daughter and her grandchildren. She was one person. How do we make that choice between supporting them and supporting our grandchildren? So Becky and I created Grand Family Coalition. We started getting phone calls every day from other grandparents who were raising their grandchildren. So eventually, we started helping these families. And I still continue to go with Becky to the courthouse. And one day her daughter came home and said, "Mom, I've had enough. I'm ready to get recovery. I'm ready to get help. But I'm going to go home and I'm going to tell my boyfriend that I'm leaving him one last time. I want my children back. I want help." The next day, they found Becky's daughter overdosed and frozen to death under a tree. That's why I do what I do. There are grandparents in this room who have faced the same thing. I was lucky. My grandson struggles with fetal alcohol and autism. My daughter is now 50 and doing amazing because of the support that I created for other grand families.
Thank you. Cheryl.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Goodman, and I am here as a parent who just lost their child last October. So it literally has just been a year. My story is a little different because it didn't start out dark or bleak, but my son went to Cherry Creek High School. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. And a practical joke was played on him where it's called tabletopping, and somebody gets on all fours and then the other pushes you. But when my son got pushed, his knee came out of his leg and he couldn't even walk, and the kids ran off. So he had to have 3 surgeries to repair his knee, and they all needed to be with opiates. So between that and his lack of self-esteem, he was upset that he had to wear crutches because everybody would laugh. And so there was a lot of bullying and a bad stigma at that time. So we put him in numerous programs, and we were fortunate to be able to afford those programs, but actually none of them worked except for one, and that is Stout Street Foundation, which is where I dropped my son off and told him he either goes there or he lives on the streets. And he passed away at 31, so this has been a long journey for us. But because of Stout Street, it's a free 2-year program, treatment recovery program, that is amazing. And so now I have become a board member. I also have a very good friend whose son died of fentanyl poisoning, who brought me to our wonderful Attorney General's office. Well, office, we actually had coffee. And he was such a good listener, and he's letting me keep my son Ryan Goodman's name alive. And I just thank all of you for listening.
And Tammy, who introduced Cheryl and I, couldn't be here, but her son Braden died in a different and painful episode of being told, take this, I forget what he was told, Xanax pill or oxycodone, it'll help you sleep. And it was fentanyl, and he died. The stories of loss are shattering, and Tanya, you in Advocates for Recovery created a program to support peer-to-peer connection, and that's something that, as I mentioned before, Tracy is someone who's doing. It is adjacent to what we often hear about, which is the person in recovery, but you've really recognized the need to support the family. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, thank you. We have to support the families, and we have to do that with peer-to-peer support because families deserve recovery too. And that's the first reason. We need to be utilizing our family members who all have stories just like those of us in recovery who have walked in addiction and now walk in recovery in their roles. It makes space for them, hold space for them. And not just the people who are in recovery, but to really pay attention to those family members. I really believe strongly that we need to have family members like Tracy, for example, like Trina, for example, who have their true lived experience of being a family member, and they have that story to bring, and they can hold the hand of the next family member coming forward. So we've been doing that for a while with peers and with mental health diagnoses and substance use disorders. But what happens with that is I've watched this, I'm really old, I've watched this for a long time now. And so we're having peers who are working in substance use step forward and say, well, I'm a family member. And I think that's wonderful, me too. But I'm a real big believer in the pure role of a family support specialist. And we don't need to use family support as an add-on to what we're already doing. We need to make space for the family members and really allow them to do that. So some of the things we've all heard about is craft, doing craft groups, putting those in treatment programs. But one of the things in our world, in an authentic recovery community organization, is that Tracy does host craft groups, but it's in an environment where the identified person doesn't have to be in a treatment program. These parents can walk in and come in or even hop on Zoom and be part of that craft group without being engaged, somebody being engaged in formal treatment. We also have family support group that meets once a month. It doesn't have a topic. It's just families come together and talk to each other. And then we're real lucky to have Tracy, who does one-on-one individual peer support, family peer support with other family members. And so I think that we have to be doing that. Families need to have their own plan for their recovery, regardless of what their children or their other family members are doing.
Tanya, how often do you see family members try to deny that need? And what do you say when you see that situation?
So we see it often, and it is still a struggle for us to get folks to connect to Tracy, to our family support specialist, because they're not the one with the problem. And I remember in my own last treatment episode, my father sat in that room and said, I'm not the one with the drug problem here. I'm just the dad. And so I think we have a lot more work to do around stigma and helping family members to be able to believe for themselves what I started that with, which is families deserve recovery. To me, I had a staff member that would say, my family deserves recovery from exposure to me, during my addiction, and I absolutely believe in that. And I don't want this to just be an add-on in a treatment program. I want it to be sitting in the community.
Excuse me, can I just add
Please jump in, yeah.
one thing to that? There is a big stigma as a family member because you go through so much trauma, and it's similar to what the addict is going through. It's really no different other than you're not taking a substance. And I just find that, oh God, I just lost my train of thought. I just find that you have to try and get help, but there's got to be a way that there's more support of families, because one, there's HIPAA, so it's difficult to find out anything. And two, the only person that reached out to us as a family was the morgue. So they called to check on us, but that's all we heard from. So it's a tough thing.
I'm going to follow up because it's obviously key in our connection. You had the experience of having a good friend who lost a child also because of this crisis. How quickly did you and Tammy connect after your loss of Ryan?
So Tammy and I actually connected before Ryan passed away. I was trying to help Tammy because I had been working in that field a little bit. So I met her and went through it. And then 4 years later, here we are. We're now bonded forever.
So you had gotten involved in advocacy as the parent of someone struggling with addiction before your loss.
Yes. Yes, but now that I've actually gone through the full cycle, I just think more needs to be done, especially for peers and for families. There's not enough resources.
So as I talked about at the beginning, there's all sorts of different scenarios. You're now on a different side than you were before, but I want to take you back. Are you seeing gaps both after the loss, but also while you're the parent of a child struggling with addiction? Were there any support systems that you could go to then?
Just private places that cost a lot of money, and several families don't have the capability to pay or afford those modalities.
This is perfect for Trina because it's already been celebrated once. I'm going to do a second. I'm going to tell you the acronym: Community Reinforcement and Family Training CRAFT. You're trying to help fill this need. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So like Tracy, I provide craft classes in Colorado. They're virtual, they're free. Usually it's a 12 session, so 12 class sequence. They're evidence-based. I teach them or facilitate them only for parents because that's where my lived experience is, and we have found that the lived experience is really, really important. If I were a therapist providing craft, it would take on a completely different type of connotation. But because I'm a family member who has lived through this, I can give other parents hope besides teaching and facilitating the evidence-based curriculum. We have 3 classes a week. They go for 12 weeks. I co-facilitate with my daughter, Mila Long, who's an addiction counselor, who's now 8 years sober. And we also add a couple of classes into ours, an evidence-based brain chemistry class that she and Denise Vincioni of DRG, who was the DORA rep, created. That is amazingly important, we have found, because when people understand what's going on in the brain, they look at addiction very, very differently. And it takes on a whole new meaning. It's not about, why is my child doing this? It's not about the way my husband shook me and said, make her stop. We can't make them stop. We have to understand that connection and communication are the #1 grounds for being able to influence and communicate with someone in a positive way. So we learn all these skills in craft.
Is craft something both for Cheryl's prior situation and post-loss, or is it only in one case?
We've had parents lose a child while they're in craft, and they have chosen usually to discontinue, and then
Okay.
we send them to GRASP or a grief support program for someone who has lost a family member through a substance use disorder.
And just sticking with Cheryl's example, how would Cheryl have heard about craft? Because a lot of people clearly are not hearing about it. And what can we, as this community of practice, do better to get the word out about craft, helping people who are in the situation Cheryl was in, not knowing where to turn, finding this incredible resource?
I think we're doing a better job. I think the Behavioral Health Administration is on a campaign and doing a much better job, because I'm getting cold calls all the time now from parents wanting to join craft. But back up 7 years ago when I started doing this, I was reaching out to the community, and I was doing that through Natural Highs of Ani Dilger, through the university, through our school district. So it was very difficult finding people, and now they're coming to us.
Gail, you have brought up already the child welfare system and the way grandparents are connected to it and the challenges there. What percent of those in your coalition are facing that exact struggle of the child welfare system, and what percent are able to more, let's say, seamlessly manage to help take care of their grandkids?
Well, actually, I have some really good data that I think you'd really be interested to know. We knew that
I did not tell her I was going to ask this question, by the way. This is just how prepared she is.
I do advocate nationally, and so I am very much aware of the situation of grandparents and other kin raising their relatives. There are 2.5 million children in the U.S. who are raised by grandparents and other kin with a parent is not in the home. There are 34,000 children here in Colorado. 40% of those report that it was opioids that caused the problem. Kinship caregivers play a critical role in raising children of trauma and are often unrecognized, seldom receive help, resources, or even support from the child welfare system. For every child in the child welfare system, there are 19 more outside of the system, saving taxpayers $10.5 billion a year by keeping them out of the child welfare system. They lack legal guidance, financial stability, education, and how to support the youth in their care. 25% of these children have a disability or considered fragile due to drug and alcohol exposure, many born with addictions. Children face educational challenges, long-term mental health issues, and social emotional challenges. I would like to tell you a short story about Bear. Bear was a 4-year-old little boy who laid next to his mother, pounding on his chest and clapping her hands, trying to wake her up, and witnessed her death. Luckily, his 70-year-old grandparents took custody of him and are raising him with absolutely no support. No child welfare, no supports in the system. There is nothing. They literally can collect TANF, child-only TANF, which is $158 a month to raise that child.
This brings to the final point I wanted to ask the panel about, and it is clearly a robust agenda. What are all the ways that we can improve our support systems to help affected families in whatever situation? And as highlighted here, there are a range of them where people are not being supported adequately, and I think it's fair to say each of you have attested to the failings, the inadequate supports. I will say, with great thanks to Trina and Tanya, and you, Gail, too, I'm hearing some improvements, but I'm also hearing a lot of needs. So I want to give you each a chance quickly to talk about if you would maybe pick one area or two where if you could improve this support system, it would make a real difference. Cheryl, can you start?
Okay, so for me, prior to COVID, Stout Street Foundation, when Ryan was in that program, they had a great family fundraiser that occurred once a month. And we were able to see coin ceremonies, we were able to see people who are graduating, and it was a unique experience to get families together. So unfortunately, things are different with monies, and so it's nice to know that there's an opportunity to receive monies to enhance programs like that. I mean, I think that was the most impactful thing to me, because parents meeting parents, and you become instantaneously bonded. So I would love to see more of that. I think that would be wonderful.
Gail?
Yeah, so I think families often feel unheard, unseen, overlooked. And we need to recognize that these families need support. They don't always come into it the same way. So I know of craft. I send my families to craft. They need peer support. They need to know that someone understands them. Those with lived experience understand their journey better than anybody else does. But what we need is for support for these families. So I've been doing this for 18 years, and in 18 years, those families have not got support. And because they're not involved in the child welfare system, they get even less support. Just last year, kinship families can now receive the same rate of pay as a foster parent, which is wonderful, but they have to give up custody to the state. And I want to know from all of you who wrote in your will that you would give the state custody of your child. And so these families choose to be deferred from the child welfare system and do it on their own. So they need our community. They need all of you. They need all of your services. They need to be connected.
Thank you. Trina?
Being a family member no matter who your identified person is who's struggling, is one of the scariest, loneliest, most isolating feelings and emotional journeys, because we have stigmatized this disease so badly. I bring peers into high schools. We go into 7 high schools. We spend 4 days in every high school, and I open our presentations that I'm a mom, and the reason we're there is to talk about this, because 1 in 3 families experiences addiction. It may not be in your direct, immediate family, but it might be your aunt, your uncle, your grandparent, your cousin. Why are we not talking about this? Why are we not embracing this? If we didn't stigmatize this and discriminate, then we would feel supported, and we wouldn't isolate, and we wouldn't be filled with shame. Because every parent or every partner that goes through this says, what did I do wrong? How did I get here? And it wasn't what you did wrong. It's what happened, but here you are, and you need the love and support of your community rather than to feel shamed and isolated. And I didn't talk about it. I left so many friendships over 7 to 8 years because I couldn't talk about it. And if I did, people looked at me like, well, here's what you need to do. You need to send her here and lock her up there, and and it's like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So we've got to take the shame away. We've got to talk about this. We've got to be open, and we've got to realize that this is a disorder of the brain. Again, going back to that brain chemistry, we really have to understand what's going on, because then we can take the, the blaming out of it, okay? And I think Smart Recovery is also a really wonderful recovery group if anyone's looking for one. There aren't a lot of in-person meetings, but they're growing. And at the same time, in conjunction with the family and friends meeting, they have a recovery meeting for the person who's trying to be in recovery. They don't have to be in recovery. It's not an AA meeting in the sense that you're counting your days. You're just working towards it. It is in the CRAFT model. And some of these meetings once a month bring the family members and the identified person together, and they say it's mind-blowing. So I urge people to look into Smart Recovery.
Trina, you said for a long time you wouldn't talk about it. Was there a time when you started talking about it? I mean, here you are talking about it, so there must be. What
Oh,
helped?
I guess when my daughter started getting it, when she got into MAT treatment, and I started to understand what was happening to her physiologically, and also watching her want to be in recovery. I mean, I got to my lowest point in my life when she was going through this. I mean, I thought about jumping off a cliff, but I had a younger son, and, you know, I needed to be there for him. But I had to grieve her. I had to grieve her before I could pull myself up and start forward again.
Tanya, what gaps?
So I think it's a combination of everything we've already heard, and we have to provide more opportunity for people to be able to walk in with no barrier or low barrier to be able to say, I need support. And we've done that fairly well with the peer system when we're talking about the identified person, but there's still a big gap with the family. And so we have the craft group, but I know that craft group, the short amount of training that goes into it and people implementing it into the treatment systems is great. But what about when people don't get to treatment? Or what if they don't have the money to go to treatment? So we got to put this in different places. And one of my colleagues in Salt Lake City, Utah, actually worked with the writer of craft and learned how to implement craft into the recovery community organization model. And so Tracy and anybody else that does this on our team goes through that training. And so I also hear that there's not enough marketing, there's not enough time for people, they don't know that they can reach out and get help. And so that continues to be a challenge, and I think we could think about some of the marketing and development of how to get the word back out there. The other thing that I think is super important is we've got to budget for family support specialists. So we haven't been doing that. We did that, hiring one person. We have one ROAC in Denver that has given us money to hire a new family support specialist. We need to continue that and continue to put these family peers in these environments where people can have access to them and get support out of that. And I just want to say this needs to come from a non-clinical standpoint in an authentic recovery community organization where there's no cost to the person walking in the door, and continue to push this forward in Colorado to help our families.
Sorry, Phil, can I say
Please,
one?
Cheryl, jump back in.
I'm sorry to...
No.
But I just thought of something else. I think the biggest thing out of what we're all saying, too, is we need resources. We need a place where parents can go to find where to go.
Yeah.
And, you know, if for people that are stigmatized, if they could find something off their phone or somewhere that's just a phone number to call to get support in any way you can would be very helpful.
Gil, you want to jump back in?
I really do. I also want us to remember that it's about the children. There's children who are left behind, and we need to support them. Many of these families, they wind up overdosing, leaving children with no support, and we're leaving them with grandparents who have no idea how to support them, no idea how to address the trauma. And then those kids grow up, and many of our grandparents are raising teenagers who are also becoming addicted. We need that support system through the lifespan of these children.
What I'm struck with in this conversation is the gaps between the systems. We had the earlier conversation talking about silos, and here we're talking about the child welfare system, where it is directly involved, and yet it's placing now custody with grandparents and providing no support around the underlying trauma. We have the criminal justice system, which has victim advocates, but that's separate from being a family support specialist. And here, Cheryl, all you heard from was the morgue. We need to think about how we better support these systems and build in these supports. We have put out this $12 million, and one of the priority areas is how do we support families. So all of you here who can think about what it looks like to fill in these gaps, to provide these key supports, to improve these services, we want living laboratories in these areas. I know I said we might have time for questions, but I don't know that we're going to be able to top the courage, the thoughtfulness, and the service that you're all providing. Thank you all for staying in this work. Can you join me? Tracy, I take it back. Tracy deserves the last word. Tracy.
Thank you, Attorney General Phil. Since you're talking about ways to improve the community and so forth, we do have, and Sarah went to get them from our table, our compassion cards here when we talk about only getting the word as we have about our loved ones. Cheryl, I hear you. You know, from at that point in time. And so what we've done through the Effective Family and Friends Work Group, through the Colorado Consortium for Prescription Drug Abuse and Prevention, that's long, isn't it? We have put together compassion cards. And that is a resource and a connection for families and friends who need to find those resources at the time that they need them most, whether it's treatment, whether it's GRASP, as was mentioned, grief recovery after support passing. So we have those. You can scan the QR code, and when and if you're ready, you can connect with various resources, which is on our webpage through the Affected Family and Friends Work Group. So that is just an opportunity for resources. And one other quick thing I'll say is, getting back to supporting families, I believe that it's the whole family that needs to recover together. So it's the siblings that often get left out. It's the others in the family. Everybody needs to be on the same page and talking and communicating about how they can support their loved one that is struggling with substance use. That way, that builds trust within the family, and it builds that communication that we talk about through CRAFT. And I think there needs to be more of that, whether that's, you know, through the family, peer-led, as I myself am peer-led through my own loss of our beautiful boy, Evan, or whether that's a clinical approach, or maybe it's a combination of both. But we need to be given the education, the resources to support the entire family, not just mom and dad, or so often just mom coming to the group meetings and dad won't come. Everybody in the family needs to be on the same page, so everybody can feel like they're recovering together in way of supporting the person that they love. That's crucial, that's critical, and we were at a loss at that time trying to do that.
Can we thank Tracy and our wonderful panel? Thank you.